Not to talk. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to beautiful Grand Forks, the proud home of University of North Dakota and the Fighting Hawks. This is the time and place for the Grand Forks Growth Fund Committee, a Jobs Development Authority. I'll begin with a roll call.
Weigel.
Here.
Dockler. Dockler, are you on? Weber.
Here.
Mock. Here. Kavani.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Veen. And Mayor Buczynski.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
First item on the agenda this evening is annual election of officers. We need to elect, we've been joined by Ms. Dockler, for the record. We need to elect a chair, vice chair, and a secretary treasurer. So we'll begin with chair of the new JDA. I'm looking for any nominations or comments. Mr. Sandy.
Mr. Weber, thank you. Over the last 2 years, I think you've done an outstanding job running the JDA meetings. The care with which you've taken to provide information to the committee has been very helpful, and so I personally would think it would be great if you would be willing to serve for another 2 years, so I would make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. Further comments? Looking for a second, possibly. We have a second from Ms. Mock. So we have a motion for Mr. Sandy, a second from Ms. Mock. Any further questions or comments?
Mr. Weber, I
Yes.
just real quickly.
Mr. Weigel, please.
I know with the growth fund, we're going to have an election probably in the next coming weeks. And maybe the city attorney can weigh in on this at a later time, but I know you've served as the president of that committee as well, which sends things directly to this committee. And now you will be president of this committee again, because I intend on voting for you. But maybe that's something we look at or talk about a little bit later, so that maybe you're not president of both, being that they primarily send things here as well. So maybe that's a conversation for another day, but happy to support you.
Very good, thank you. And being aware of that concern, I did contact Ms. Richards. The next Growth Fund meeting is scheduled for July 20th, 2 weeks from tonight. That'll probably be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We did have an election just last year because we had a change of membership, but I've requested that election be held on July 20th to try to sync the two. So that will be a discussion that evening. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We now are looking for a nomination for vice chair of the Jobs Development Authority. Ms. Mock?
I would nominate Ken Bean for vice chair if he's interested.
Very good. Looking for a second. Second. Mr. Cromie, second. Comments, questions?
No comment?
Please, Mr. Sandy.
Is Mr. Veen interested?
I believe that he is. I thought that he was going to be attending this evening. Apparently, something is held, unless he's showed up at the meeting so far? No.
He was just on the screen.
He was on
He was, okay. I'll let you answer that then, Mr. Veen. Comments? There we go. We can't hear you quite yet. Looks like your microphone's off.
I'll just take that as an I'm interested. How's that?
Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. We have a thumbs up. Very good. Okay. And then all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And then we're looking for a motion for secretary treasurer.
Mr. Weber?
Mr. Weigel. Yes.
I'll nominate Mr. Kavami.
Very good. And we have a second from Mr. Sandy. Questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We have accomplished for another 2 years the election of officers. It says annual election of officers, so apparently we do this each year. Very good. See you again next July, folks. Well, next item on the agenda, 3.1, under informational items, CARES Act EDA funding update. Ms. Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. As I mentioned at the Growth Fund Committee meeting a week ago, the Growth Fund was invited by the EDA Economic Development Administration to apply for funding to set up another revolving loan fund that would assist businesses impacted by the COVID pandemic. I was hoping to be able to announce that that had been awarded, but unfortunately I haven't got anything but preliminary information. So nothing has changed, but we have got very positive feedback on the application. So I hope that next month's meeting I'll be able to say that it's in place and we're working on getting it up and running. Certainly be happy to answer any questions, but nothing really new to report from last Monday.
Very good. And you say next month's JDA meeting. Was there some hope for a meeting on July 20th, right after Growth Fund, or is that not the current intention?
Certainly could.
We could. Very good. We'll see how that plays out, but at the next JDA meeting, we hope to hear on the EDA funding update.
Correct.
Very good. Thanks. Which takes us to item 3.2, the Nistler College of Business and Public Administration, Presentation and Investment Partnership. And I have the great pleasure of welcoming President Armacost from the University of North Dakota to begin that presentation. Please, sir.
Great, thank you so much. It's great to be here, and I'm the new president. We have a new mayor, and there's a wonderful opportunity for partnership in a variety of ways. And today, I'm here to talk about one of those opportunities, and that is to gain the city's investment in the Nistler College of Business and Public Administration. This is a tremendous opportunity for us, and we're leveraging a significant number of private donors, as well as a significant amount of state funding. And what we're here today to talk about is an investment by the city in the continuation of this project. And in fact, this would be the capstone investment, meaning that if the city chooses to participate in this, the building of the Nistler College, this particular investment would put us over the top and would be able to claim and to say proudly that it was the partnership between the city and the campus of UND that actually made this project happen. And when you think about this project, and you'll hear some more detail here in a moment, but when you think about this project, there's a near-term benefit to the citizens of Grand Forks, both the city and the county. The labor that it will take to build this new $70 million facility will bring a total investment in local labor of about $21 million. And this data comes from David Flynn, our UND economist. And then in addition, we're expecting the total spending that comes out of this, labor plus additional expenditures in the county of Grand Forks, to be around $64 million. So when you think about the total investment, and we're looking at $1.33 million from the city, we think that the turnaround and the benefit to the local community is enormous. So in the long term, when you think about the investment in a facility like this, you think about the development of great minds, you think about the contribution of the Nistler College to the local economy and also to the economy of the state of North Dakota. The opportunities are truly tremendous. And so to tell you more about this, let me introduce my colleague, Dr. Amy Henley, who is the Dean of the Nistler College of Business and Public Administration. Amy.
Thank you, President Armacost. Dean Henley.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all of you for the opportunity to be here today. We are truly incredibly excited about this potential investment on the part of the city into our new space. As we look at this new state-of-the-art building that'll be on the cornerstone of the quad on campus, we're excited that it is a state-of-the-art mix of small, medium, and large spaces. Right now, we're teaching students in the way that is pedagogically advanced, but our space doesn't reflect that. So we have had a vision that so many have helped to realize of an entire new home for the Nistler College. And in that new home on the first floor is a mix of community, of student, of staff, and of faculty, and of alumni. So we could not be more excited about the potential investment of the city. We see critical learning taking place here from the experiential learning opportunities that could be a part. 70% of UND alumni choose to live and work in North Dakota after graduation. And we look at this potential investment of the city, partnered with the investment of our state, to be incredibly impactful on the entire region, and most importantly, the state of North Dakota. Right now, our College of Business and Public Administration enrollment is approximately 1,700 to 1,800 students. And we feel we can grow that number of students to over 2,500. And the significant impact that each of those additional students can have on the region, and particularly the city, the economy, and their choice to stay in the state and the city after graduation can be immeasurable. Additionally, this potential partnership with the city is going to allow our students to have access to so many more internships. Right now, experiential learning, a key component, is the internship opportunity. And we have many students who will do 4 and 5 internships. So think of the potential impact of them having internships right here in the city, as we would have a presence of the city on the first floor of our building. In addition, we're very proud to say that we are one of only 3 colleges of business that are accredited that have both public administration and business under the same college. So we are particularly excited about the mix between the Institute of Business and Policy Analytics and possible contributions to this new investment. So by having the public administration hat and the private enterprise hat, we think we have the opportunity to make a key and unique contribution in the city and in the state. We've worked very hard on the floor plans, and as you'll see, if you can see it, the Workforce Development Center that we've plucked out and have highlighted here is right on the main floor of our current floor plan. And it is visible from every key area on that first floor. So in looking at the city's potential investment, they would be in prime real estate location. We have a community plaza that can seat over 300 visitors. So the visibility to that and to our main auditorium would signify the city's presence and their support of this important project. So now, Deanna Carlson-Zink will talk about the connection with the UND Foundation.
Very good, thank you. Ms. Zink, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Weber, and good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I just want to highlight something that Dean Henley just mentioned about the location of this facility. It is going to be in what I think is one of the most beautiful parts of our campus, right in that quad. Sitting on the corner, connected to Merrifield Hall, connected to our renovated Chester Fritz Library. It is going to be fabulous. And when you look out into the quad, you're going to have this whole glass looking out, and that's where the Workforce Development Center will be. So the City of Grand Forks is such an essential partner, and you are more important today than ever to make sure this project happens. Dean Henley mentioned that we have about 1,800 students. Well, when you look at the College of Business students, our faculty, and our staff that are in that facility, it's almost 2,000 individuals. Additionally, we have an estimated 15,000 prospective students and their families that come through on campus tours, that come to hear conferences and symposia, and even to attend our career fairs. So there is a high traffic through this facility, and we know it's going to increase even more in this new area. The City of Grand Forks Workforce Development Center. That is going to be the center for internships and for research. And as Dean Henley mentioned, it's going to be located right next to the Public Policy and Business Analytics section, right on that main floor. And it is here that our students will be able to hone their leadership skills, their cognitive flexibility, that emotional intelligence. All of this you can learn there while having the opportunity to have internships here in the city and to experience those research opportunities. It will have an effect on our students, and it will definitely have an effect on our students and our city and community. So when students, prospective students, are coming through that building with the billboard, they will know that they are in the city of Grand Forks. This is where UND is located, that this is a business-friendly community, and we are excited to have our students here. So we believe this is the right place, the right project, the right time, and definitely the right partnership to make this investment happen. The City of Grand Forks and the University of North Dakota together can really create a difference for our community and for our students. So we are asking you to consider an investment of $1.33 million, as you've heard, for the City of Grand Forks Workforce Development Center in the Nistler College Business and Public Administration. Additionally, we have the unique opportunity right now that the state of North Dakota has offered a match as long as we reach the $50 million of private philanthropy for this building. And we are $1.3 million away from making that happen. So we ask you to consider again the opportunity to partner with the University of North Dakota. We've done it in many different ways. This is another example of how we can come together to benefit students and the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A reminder tonight, this is an informational item. The expectation is that we might take this to a vote at the next JDA meeting. Looking for any questions or comments? Mayor Buczynski.
I think it's important to note that it's a $133,000 investment over 10 years. As a city, you have to have a balance. You have to have a balance between making smart budget decisions, but also investments in the future economy and economic stimulus. I think this is a great chance to bridge that. Just looking as President Armacost listed on the construction multiplier that he got from Dr. Flynn at $64 million, you can also just look at the economic impact of students. I had the EDC put something together of exactly what one more student per year brings in for overall economic impact, and the numbers they came up with in the North Dakota University system is 29,414. So our investment to move this project along a little bit sooner and just bringing a few more students in could cause this investment to be paid back very soon, very quickly. It's a bridge too. I think it's a great bridge for the city of Grand Forks and UND. We've always talked about bringing UND downtown. This gives the city a chance to be on campus and to have a workforce development center and probably one of the finest business schools in the country. I had the pleasure of being at Gamble Hall and being a student there, and I know there's some excellent professors there, but the facilities are lacking, and they've been lacking for decades, so I'm glad that that's finally going to turn around. So for the three reasons for speeding this up, for having a city presence at UND, and strong collaboration and the economic impact, it's something I'll definitely support and get behind. So thank you, President Armacost, Deanne, and Amy for presenting today.
Thank you, Mayor Buczynski. Any further comments?
Mr. Weber?
Mr. White.
Just real quick, thank you all for coming. I think it's important, the relationship that we build with the university and the city, and I think we've done a really good job of that. One thing that I would look for, both from the city side and the university, is the partnership should continue. And the one program that I always thought was very interesting is the City of Grand Forks has a tuition reimbursement program. And essentially that money goes to all these different universities throughout the country when employees sign up to take classes. I always thought that was odd, considering we have a wonderful university just a few blocks away. So what I would like to do is I'd like to expand on those partnerships that we currently have and look for Mayor Buczynski and Mr. Phelan and maybe Tanji from HR to sit down with UND and say, how can we put these dollars back into the community, and how can we put them back into UND? Because I think that's important, that we're not shipping this money and this benefit that employees have to universities all across the country. So I think that's important, and I think working with UND and President Armacost, I think we can get a program in place that will directly benefit UND, the city, and our wonderful employees.
Very good. Yes, Mr. Sandy, please. Oh, Mr. Kavami.
I have a few questions. First, I want to just say thank you again for presenting, and Before I ask these questions, I want you to know that I'm 100% supportive of this project and think it's vital for UND and vital for Grand Forks. But in my private world, I look at any new partnership and I try to understand, is this equitable for all parties? I'm sure you can appreciate that with the business school and understand that I'm trying to understand what are the options that were on the table. Is this the only option that was on the table? I understand that we have to take the $1.3 million and get that approved, that we have that funds to get the match. Is the option, and again, in my world, if I was presented with a $68 million project rather than a $70 million project, I'd find a way to make it happen. So is this opportunity for us to invest, which again, I'm supportive of the project, or is this an opportunity to say, well, is this worth the taxpayers' dollars? I heard from my constituents consistently that taxes are high, where's the money going, be responsible with the money, and that's the voice that I'm just trying to say right now. Again, supportive of the project. But is there the opportunity to still have this project without the 1.3, or is it off the table? I know that, again, you have to go and get that approved, and as we think about our $1.3 million, what's the plan for that had this not been here? We have lots of city properties. I think as those things get sold, what are we doing? What's our plan? Are we going to be reactionary? And this, again, represents a great investment. I think it's a great idea, but just want to make sure that it is something that is 100% equitable for both parties. As we look at our relationship with the city and the university, I want that to keep getting stronger. So are there other opportunities there where you guys are coming to us and we're saying, yes, absolutely. Is there an opportunity where it needs to be a two-way street? I'm not saying that isn't. This is my first council meeting actually talking. So again, I'm just throwing things out there as I'm thinking about it, but just those are my concerns. I'm again, supportive of the project. Just due diligence is very important for me, and if it's $1.3 million of taxpayer money, I need to know that if someone comes to me and says, did you understand why you did that? Why did you do that, and what are the reasons? And again, supportive of the project, just want those questions answered. That's all.
Very good. Dean Henley, please.
Floor plan, I think, would be helpful.
Great.
If we go back. Let's see. So, and Deanna, please also contribute but the nature of the project, and I've been here 2 years now, so I'm still understanding the legislative process in the state, having come from the Southeast. Thrilled to be here. And the amendment, or the bill that was passed indicates that it is a $70 million project, so that we can't, I asked those questions, particularly when COVID hit, right? If we can't raise the money for the project, can we have a less expensive building and total project? But the $70 million is determined in the bill that was passed by the state, so the project must remain at that. So in terms of looking at the $1.3 million investment, that is a similar pricing model as the other items that are on that first floor in terms of square footage. So I appreciate your question about equitable. And if you look at, and we could share some of this with you as well, but some of the other prime spaces that have been invested in on that first floor are at a similar, if not greater, price point for that square footage. Does that answer the one?
Absolutely. I think I might have more questions, but I think it'd be great to just dialogue between now and the next meeting.
Sure.
Again, supportive of the project.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kafami. Mr. Sandy.
Thank you. This is obviously very exciting. I think, the University of North Dakota is, I'm a two-time alum. I love my university and spent far too many years roaming halls, Whitmer Hall and then Gamble Hall. I think the city, with the new administration in the city and the new administration at the university, this is a golden opportunity for us to strengthen our relationship. Many people in this room have heard me say in the past that UND and the city of Grand Forks haven't had a great relationship in the past. I lived through a couple administrations at the university that weren't excited about even saying that Grand Forks is a college town. I think that is changing, or has changed, and I think it's great for our communities. Similar to Mr. Weigel, looking for opportunities where the university can and the city can work together. I've been spearheading and talking a lot about dual credit for the high school students in the city of Grand Forks for maybe 4 years now. And through work with one of Mr. Weber's interns, I found that currently in the state of North Dakota, among all of the North Dakota Department of Higher Education institutions, only Dickinson State, Bismarck State, and Williston State College offer on-campus options for high school students. I believe our University of North Dakota, and frankly, North Dakota State, who are the leaders in education in our state, should be leading on this topic as well, and certainly should be offering dual credit to our high school students, because as we've seen in the presentation, the goal is to encourage students to come to the University of North Dakota and then keep them in Grand Forks. What a better way to get the local students engaged, but get them on campus when they're juniors and seniors, and give them internships and opportunities to stay here and get excited about their university and about our community. So I'm certainly a big supporter of this plan and will be voting to support it if nothing happens related to dual credit in the next few weeks. But I, for one, believe that dual credit is low-hanging fruit and would be a great way for our university to show that they are interested in having a partnership with the city of Grand Forks and the parents and taxpayers within our community. Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. Yes, Mayor Buczynski.
I think I could just add that myself and President Armacost already have a pretty good relationship, and whether something's expressed or implied here, I think we're going to do well going forward. We've both been on the job just a couple of weeks and working together to get a $70 million building built, so hopefully that continues.
Based on weeks in service, you hold the all-time record for visits to council. So thank you. Any further comments? Ms. Mock?
Is part of the goal with a project like this and the city involvement to get more people from the community on campus? Is that part of this idea, and are we going to encourage that in a certain way?
The answer is absolutely. As we're talking generally about partnerships, any way to bring the university and the community together really matters. So we need to use, whether it's dual credit or whether it's your suggestion earlier, ways to connect local students with the university more strongly. And furthermore, wouldn't it be great to connect people coming from outside the community more strongly to the community itself? I can't think of a better way, and this ties to the earlier question as well about what if you didn't have the $1.33 million. The answer is we wouldn't get the state match if we don't exceed our investment threshold. We would have to identify a different investor or different donor. But I cannot think of a more appropriate and a better way to signify the connection between the city of Grand Forks and the University of North Dakota than having a workforce development center that says in the building in prominent letters, the City of Grand Forks Workforce Development Center on our campus, right? So you hit on the greatest point, which is that connection is what we're trying to build, not just through this initiative, but through these other initiatives as well.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Mock?
If I can just do one minor follow-up, if we're going to encourage people to go on campus more, which is really good, parking is one of the biggest issues, and I hate to bring it up, I really do, but it is difficult if you're not actively working or going to school to find a accessible way to get to campus. So
Wonderful.
That would be a point, I think.
Thank you. And I believe this will go on the record, but with any presidential search, the one thing that comes up in any set of interviews is parking. So I look forward to facing that challenge as well. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you again. And it's my understanding that this Workforce Development Center would be the center not just for internships in the business college, but for internships across campus. This is increasingly an important part of what university students are looking for, and it's often one of the first questions they ask when they come to campus. And we know that students make the decision about which campus they're going to choose on their visits within the first minutes, and this is the kind of showcase that can really help to influence that, especially when connected with internships. In fact, when those prospective students come to UND, We want to make sure that they're choosing UND for their future education. And then the internships and other opportunities that can arise from this Workforce Development Center are the kinds of opportunities that help connect them to the community to further that dream that our graduates from UND choose Grand Forks as the place to start their careers and to raise their families. So look forward to having more discussions in the next couple of weeks. We'll see the timing on the next JDA meeting. Anything further at this time? I'm hearing a general consensus of support. Ms. Doctor, Mr. Vian, anything further to add?
Mr. Weber, can you hear me?
We sure can, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very good. I finally made it through. So, no, I just wanted to say something. I'm very appreciative of this proposal. Mr. Weber, you brought this in and had some discussions with many of us months ago about this opportunity and option, and it's really kind of exciting and thrilling to see that it's finally going to be happening, and the benefits that we have, I think, are going to be around for many, many years to come. I think it is definitely an investment, but I envision it as being a great benefit to us and the return to be far beyond maybe what the initial cost is going to be for us. And I think it's really unique to have this kind of a relationship with the university, and for the city to actually have an office in this building, I think is going to be nothing but beneficial for the community. So very supportive of it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Vian. And Ms. Doctor, anything to add?
No, you all pretty much covered it.
Very good. All right. Well, the new mayor and the new president are just new on the job, so this is coming to us fairly recently. We do have to have the city attorney review some of the terms, and hopefully we'll have a more official answer for you very soon. But at this point, a green light of support. Very good. Thank you. And moving on to JDA action items. 4.1, PACE loan request, Northern Tier Seed. Mr. Baumbach.
Thank you, Chairman Weber, members of the JDA. My name is Brandon Baumbach, Business Development Manager for the Grand Forks Region Economic Development Corporation, and tonight presenting the Northern Tier Seed application to you. This is a company, agribusiness company located in Thompson, North Dakota, that has been doing a lot of work and investment in our county for recent years here. This primary sector company has continued growth and invested $6.4 million in their site since 2014, which has been substantial and really helps to retain the value that we grow in our fields. This time, they're looking to expand their current bulk bin storage by adding 20 bins for an additional total of 120,000 bushels of capacity. The total project is at $1.6 million investment, and this PACE request in front of you would help buy the interest rate down to a 1%. This is a request of just over $61,000 from the Jobs Development Authority, which would leverage $184,000 from the Bank of North Dakota. The deal has been reviewed from both the EDC board and the Growth Fund and committed here. The loan to value on this is 53%, which is secure, and it's secured by a UCC filing on the equipment and a second mortgage. Lastly, the personal guarantees of Bill Weber and Paul Spruill are provided. And tonight we do have Bill Weber with us in the audience in case there are any questions at all. I'd be happy to stand for any questions as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Baumbach. This is exactly the kind of deal that we love to see come to the JDA, a great success story. Not only a success story, but also an important indication of the city's commitment to economic development in the region. The committee recommendation from last week was to concur. Looking for any further comments or questions, otherwise looking for a motion. Motion from President Sandy and from Council Rep. Kvamme. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I apologize. We need to go back for just a moment. I believe I need to, do I need to open a public hearing on this item? I do. Open a public hearing on this item. Ms. Storstad, was there any public input?
No, there's no comments on this. Thank you.
Anyone in the audience this evening? Very good. Well, then we'll move forward with the approval and move on to item 4.2, FlexPace loan request, Oxford Brewing Company. Again, Mr. Bomback.
Chairman Weber, members of the JDA. This is a new company, one of those that add value in a brand new way. They are brewing and manufacturing beer here in Grand Forks and selling across the state through kegs and other markets. They'll work primarily, it's important to note, through distributors, with the majority of their product going through a distributor out of Dickinson that would target western communities within the state. They're renovating the old Tasty Foods just off of Gateway and North 20th and being sold through those distributors. The total investment's a little bit, it's $190,000, and that would put a loan at just $142,000. So the request here is to leverage the FlexPace program through Bank of North Dakota. You would loan just over $6,000, that would leverage $11,000 from the Bank of North Dakota to buy this project down to 1%. Loan to value is great with 78%. It's secured through a UCC filing on all the equipment, and the personal guarantee is provided by Mike Opp, principal of the company. We do have Mike on the phone tonight, as well as Angie Bauman from Choice Financial, in case there are any questions for them, and I'd be happy to stand for questions as well.
Very good. Let me open this to a public hearing. Again, Ms. Storstad, was there any input this evening?
We did not receive any comments, thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? We'll close the public hearing, looking for questions or comments. Otherwise, we have a motion from Mr. Weigel, second from Mayor Bachinski. Question or comment, Mr.
Comment,
Sandy?
I mentioned this to Mayor Bachinski. I've been speaking with Mr. Opp about all of the great development that he's been doing on the north end of Grand Forks. I've heard from Mr. Schwanz and others about how much they appreciate the investment he's making on the north end because so few people are doing that. There are some eyesores up in that area that it would be great if, whether the city can take care of it. I know that there are some very ugly utility lines, overhead lines. I don't know if we have any influence over Excel or what the cost would be to that, but I would love to see the city of Grand Forks use some beautification funds invested up in the north end of Grand Forks, whether we could deal with the utilities or find some flowers or something for him. I'd love to see us also participate in what he's doing, and maybe we can get others, by us investing, we can get others to do so as well. Just purely for conversation. Thank you.
Further comments? Commitments on flowers at this time? Very good. We have a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 4.3, lease renewal request, Kitsona Corporate Center 2. Ms. Richards.
Thank you, Chairman Weber. As you noted, we do have a lease request before you to renew the lease that Kitsona has held in our Corporate Center 2 building. They've been a tenant since they took over the lease for the previous tenant in late 2013. That initial lease expired last year about this time. At that point, Kitsona had experienced some business reversals, both throughout their chain as well as associated with Demers street construction. So at the time of renewal last year, Kitsona requested and the JDA agreed to maintain their rent payment or their rent charges, but allow them to pay $2,000 a month and defer the balance of approximately $2,900 a month. They have requested that that same arrangement be allowed to be extended for another 6 months, and they have remained true to those terms. They are now current. While they do have a large balance, they have maintained the request and kept their end of the bargain, so to speak, in terms of the modified arrangement. This was recommended for approval at the Growth Fund Committee a week ago with the idea that no further extension requests come forward without some discussion about repayment terms for that outstanding business. I have heard from Tessa Heine, one of the principals, and she's more than willing to talk about that and appreciates the consideration that this group has given their business over the past, 6 years? So with that, the request is to extend for another 6-month period.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Richards. And I don't know if it's required, but in the interest of openness and transparency, we'll open a public hearing on this. Were there any comments, questions
No comments.
received? Any comments from the audience this evening? Comments or questions from JDA members? Looking for a motion. Have a motion from, comment from Mr. Sandy?
I believe Mr. Weigel at the last Growth Fund meeting asked if there were going to be some discussions about how we are going to deal with the lease payments that are accumulating. Has there been any discussion related to that yet?
Just as I said, that they're certainly willing to meet, but we haven't, since last Monday when that was discussed, we haven't convened to discuss any sort of arrangements going forward.
Very good, thank you. I'll move approval.
We have a motion from Mr. Sandy, second from Mr. Weigel. Very good. Further questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 4.4, lease renewal and employee canteen project proposal, LM Wind Fiber. Ms. Richards.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Weber. This is kind of a two-part proposal in that LM Wind Power has expressed a lot of interest in expanding into the adjoining portion of the building to develop a canteen, as well as, since we're being asked to reinvest, we're considering extending their lease, which expires this coming March in 2021. As your staff report states, they've been a fixture of the industrial park here in Grand Forks for about 20 years. They own their own facility at 1580 South 48th Street and currently lease about 128,000 of square feet of facility owned by the JDA. That is, both are necessary for their manufacturing process. About a year ago, well, actually it was completed in March of 2018, there was a major expansion, about 1.1 million, that allowed them to produce larger blades. When that project was completed, that was when the current 3-year term commenced. That project was a $1.1 million project, as I stated, and they're currently amortizing that as part of their lease payments. The request before you today is to expend up to $175,000 for this canteen fit-up that would take approximately 25 to 30% of the first floor space of the old Amazon facility that is now vacant. LM feels this is very important for their efforts to attract and retain workforce. And so that square footage would be added into their current lease, as well as extending that lease for at least 3 years with an option to renew for an additional 3. LM also requested some rent deferral and forgiveness in recognition of some of the cash flow challenges that they've experienced during the shutdown. As your staff report states, we've kind of walked through the key terms, but in terms of that requested deferral and forgiveness, that would only be a forgiveness of 4 months of rent if they both extended their current lease for 3 years and renewed for an additional 3-year term. So that would only be forgiven if we could basically consolidate their presence for at least 5 more years in the community. Again, the terms are outlined before you, but the key elements are to allow to proceed with construction of this canteen space in the Amazon building, as well as pursue extending their lease as I described.
Very good. Ms. Richards, in relation to the investments the city's made in LM in the past, the investments that LM has made in the city in the past, this is a relatively small ask. But it's my understanding we're basically being asked to spend a chunk of change to rip out some bathrooms in a large space. And then we're hoping that this space, the remaining 75–80% of the space could be leased sometime in the future. The future, as always, is difficult to predict, even more so these days, but there's some indication that that type of space there may be a great deal of interest in that type of space in the future. Do we have some idea of what it will cost us to put bathroom facilities back into the remaining space? And I'm sorry to hit you with that tonight. Thanks.
We have been working on this for a long time.
There's a lot of moving parts on this, aren't there?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're not removing bathrooms, they're just enclosing all of the bathrooms that currently exist on that first floor space within their canteen, which basically leaves the rest of that first floor unusable to another tenant without the addition of bathrooms. Preliminary cost estimates are that it would cost about another $50,000 to add back those bathrooms. We could incorporate that into this project, but it does seem more prudent to wait until we have an actual tenant and incorporate that into whatever fit-up that tenant would need. It's a little risky to assume that we would know what a future tenant would want when we haven't got anybody
Fair enough.
actually in conversations
Yes.
with us.
And basically, we're looking at, they'd have to sign another 5 years' worth of leases, 5 or 6 years, in order for them to not cover this cost. If they leave before that, they would have to cover this cost. Is that correct?
Correct. If they don't renew, then they get none of that rent forgiven, plus the full cost of this fit-up would be due. And this lease extension allows us to fully recapture all of that $1.1 million from the previous expansion that was completed in 2018.
And of course, we all hope that LM, that we remain partners for many, many years.
They are a significant
This is a small
employer
piece.
and economic engine. We would like them to stay, yes.
Very good. Thank you. Questions or comments? Mayor Buchensky.
I would just like to say, I think myself, Todd, and Debbie Swanson toured the factory on Wednesday, and you could see a real good effort at safety there under COVID. And one of the things that was lacking is space to eat. So a lot of the employees had to eat outside, eat in their cars, any place they could find for shade. And under this circumstance, I could see that it's definitely needed for recruitment and retaining employees. And just seeing in action their plan as far as COVID was impressive. I think their commitment to the community is unflinching, and I think they'll be here for many years. So I see this both as another good partnership, but something definitely needed on their end.
And is that a motion? Then?
Motion to approve.
Very good. We have a motion, hoping for a second. Second for Mr. Weigel?
I'll second, but I do have one
Please.
question.
Please, go ahead.
Have we had anybody reach out that is interested in that entire space over the last, what has been 1 or 2 years that Amazon left?
We had a couple of people look at the second floor, but we've had no one other than LM who, if the local facilities people could get GE Corporate to agree, they would be happy to take the entire space, but no, we haven't had any serious lookers at that space yet.
Thank you.
Mr. Sandy.
So, Ms. Richards, just to confirm, LM requires, the maximum they'll do is a 3-year lease, but with that lease, they require a 2-year out, correct?
3 years with an opt-out.
With an opt-out after
the
2
second-
years.
the end of the
So if
second
we
year.
get the 2 years plus a 3-year extension, technically, they could opt out after 2 years, after 2 years of the extension, and so we would only have them necessarily for 4 years. Is that correct?
Well, we would only get to the 4th year if they did renew, so we would have them for 5, I think, is
Because the
the
renewal
way I
would be
do
for
the
3
math.
years, right?
If they opted out after the end of the second year of this 3-year renewal that we're proposing, they would pay back the cost of the fit-up.
Okay, very, very good. Just wanted to confirm. So, last question. So are we assuming then that if we have a general idea that replacing 2 bathrooms into that space is going to be $50,000, are we, the city, then going to assume the cost of that? Because we're not asking LM to pay for that. So we're assuming that the city of Grand Forks is going to cover a $50,000 nut at some point in the future if we're going to lease the other space to anyone else.
You know, what the fit-up for a future tenant might look like, I don't know, but I think it's safe to assume that, minimum standards is restroom facilities, so that would be kind of a given that we would do that at our cost. It might be to incorporate it into a pretty substantial remodel, depending on who the tenant is, and that might give us some cost breaks, but I'm certainly just guessing now. But to answer your question, I think yes, as the tenant, we would be, as the landlord, any tenant would expect that our baseline facility would include restroom facilities, and that probably to try to amortize the cost of that into a new tenant's lease is not realistic.
Sure, but, so, okay, have we asked LM to cover some portion of that cost? I mean, we know that there are bathrooms there today, and they're getting the benefit of the bathrooms, but taking the benefit of bathrooms away from any future tenant that, again, which leaves the majority of that facility is still available, but it has no bathrooms, and so it's essentially unusable.
Correct. Well, we haven't asked them to cover that cost since they were asking for the JDA to absorb all the costs associated with the space that they're using. So we didn't even ask for them to pay for costs for a future bathroom. I suppose that's subject to future negotiations, but we haven't had those yet.
I think it would be more than reasonable to at least ask them to cover half, at a minimum, if not all.
As a final haggling point?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, I understand that they're a great employer in our community. I certainly want to keep them here, but I also think that we owe the taxpayers the fact that we've done the due diligence to see what we can do to make sure that the 75% of the facility that's left over can be leased to somebody else.
Yep, yep. You know, we keep saying very nice things about LM, which they deserve. It burns me that basically we're giving money to GE, the parent company of LM. But
I like
at some
giving money
point, we can ask them, you can go ahead and try that, but if they say no, I hate to show all our cards, but what would our alternative be at that point?
I'm prepared to vote no if they say no.
Yes, okay.
It's not unreasonable for them to pay for that.
Yep.
It is not unreasonable.
Well, I can certainly get on the phone first thing in the morning and see what
Very good.
sort of response and get to that suggestion.
Great.
Okay. Mayor Buchansky, yes, please.
Does the second floor is the same layout as the first floor. Does the second floor have bathrooms?
The second floor has a similar layout, and it does have bathrooms, yes.
So if someone came in and used both the second floor and the main floor, they would have bathrooms on the second floor?
They'd be available. I doubt that it would be code compliant
Right.
without adding back restrooms on the first floor. But yes, there are other restrooms in the building, just not on that first floor.
And have we had anybody else looking, I guess that was asked earlier, looking at the space, or is it, going forward, we're assuming that LM's going to continue to take up space in that building, therefore they'd be eventually purchasing more bathrooms or blowing out a wall and using more space and continue to use those bathrooms?
Well, given the lack of interest from other tenants and LM's continued interest, I think they're our best bet for a tenant for that space. You know, as Mr. Weber noted, the space could become valuable, and who knows what COVID will mean to manufacturing or office space as far as that goes. But yes, we have not had much interest in renting the space as is for the last 2 years.
It definitely does hinder renting that space out in the future, but I guess we have to weigh the costs there.
Mr. Sandy.
Simple follow-up. How about I go on record and say that if LM decides that they want more space and code dictates that they need more bathrooms, they pay for it? How does that sound?
Rather than cutting our nose off to spite our face in the meantime. Okay. Well, so exactly what is it that we're voting on then this evening? Are we asking you to go back and renegotiate the deal, or are we ready to approve? We have a motion to approve the deal as it stands right now. That's the motion on the floor. Mr. Sandy, are you asking for an amendment to the motion?
So it's a very good question, Mr. Weber. I guess probably I'm late to the party and should have asked this question at the Growth Fund meeting, which I'm not a part of the Growth Fund. So, no, I'm not. I think in the future, if we get into situations like this, it wouldn't be unreasonable to ask those questions.
And Mr. Sandy, you're not a member of the Growth Fund, but we've always welcomed your questions at every meeting. Yes, of course.
And Chairman Weber,
Yes,
just
please.
a reminder, we haven't held the public hearing yet, so we still
Very
don't
good,
know.
thank you, thank you. So we'll open the public hearing on item 4.4. Have we received any comments?
No, we have not,
We
thank you.
haven't. And are there any comments from the audience this evening? Then any further questions or comments? Otherwise, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Richards.
Thank you.
And with that, our final piece of business, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, very good. Motion in a second, meeting adjourned. Thanks.
What's your laptop at? Which sheet's mine? This one? This one. I got the old sheet. All right, we'll pick up here. Welcome to the Grand Forks City Council Monday, July 6th meeting. Call to order. Maureen, can we get a roll call, please?
Sure. Weigel?
Here.
Dockler?
Here.
Weber?
Here.
Mock?
Here.
Kabami?
Here.
Sandy?
Here.
And Bean.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 1.2, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, 1.3, Mayor's announcements. First of all, hope everyone had a good 4th of July and got to celebrate their Independence Day. It's been a fast-paced couple of weeks. We've hit the ground running on the budget and some economic development pushes going forward, so we'll hope to have some more info on those in the coming days. I'd like to thank Mike Friedolfs with Northrop Grumman and Jagadish Rao with LM for the tours this week. Also like to thank John Vastag with Development Homes, Cynthia Schaub with Global Friends, and Adam and Corey with the F5 project for coming in to see me this week. And of course on Wednesday we'll be out at the Air Force Base, so thank you to Colonel Pringle for inviting me out there. And with that, I'm going to ask Al Grasser with an update for those who have seen that the Columbia Bridge is, I believe, shut down to one lane each way. Al's going to tell us why.
That is correct. Thank you, Mayor Brown, or Mayor Bochinsky.
Old habits die hard.
Old habits. There's a photograph here of the problem that we're having with the Columbia Road overpass right now. What happens with the overpass on a bridge is it does a lot of expansion and contraction, and these are actually expansion joints here that you see a picture of. There's one on either end of the bridge, north end, south end. And in the wintertime, these things pull apart, and so there'll be lots of space between the fingers. In the summertime, when the bridge is heating and expanding, it pushes these fingers together, and that's what you can see here. The fingers are basically all the way bottomed out. That's not an unusual occurrence with the bridge. That's the way it was actually designed. But over time, sometimes things get a little bit misaligned, and so that's what you're seeing here is one set of fingers is starting to overrun the other set of fingers. And because that produces that bump there, we did close down that particular lane. The problem is less pronounced on the other lanes, so we are keeping one lane open each direction. We do have a bridge consultant expert coming into town that's going to take a look at it. We'll look at what our alternatives are. Eventually, if we had colder weather, these things would actually pull back apart. But right now, it looks like we're going to be in a warm weather pattern for a bit.
Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Anything else?
Not unless there's any other questions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bochinsky.
We got one more item. I have a short report regarding the termination of former Community Government Relations Officer, Mr. Pete Haga. I'd like to submit to the County Auditor, Maureen Storstad, for official record as required by City Code. It reads as follows. After meetings and discussions between former Community Government Relations Officer Pete Haga and myself, it was determined independently by both parties that it was desirable and beneficial for Mr. Haga to terminate the employment agreement and end his employment with the city. The reasons for such termination are that I intended to be present at City Hall and interact with department heads and employees and the public, and accordingly determined that this position, when also considering current economic conditions, could be eliminated. This agreement reached with Mr. Haga for ending his employment set forth payments that were due and owing him under the terms of the previously negotiated contract he had with the city, with the exception of a payment of $9,323.96 for additional vacation hours that will be subject to City Council approval later on during action items. So I will submit that to Maureen. That's all for general business. We can move on to awards.
2.1, COVID-19 update.
Good evening, Mayor Bochansky and members of the City Council. I'm Debbie Swanson, Director of the Grand Forks Public Health Department. I'm coming to you on the Zoom this evening. I do have an update for you, which has been emailed to the council members and is now uploaded in the City Council agenda items, so you can see this. I have 3 presentations this week for the City Council, the County Commission, and the Board of Health, all organizations that we report to. So I'm combining them into one and we'll update the data as needed. Our data is not perfect, partly due to a holiday weekend and the various entities that report to us, but I think you'll get a sense of the information that's coming to you from the Grand Forks Public Health Department and where we're at right now. And I want to thank Greta Selesky for advancing my slides this evening. So Greta, if you could go to the next slide, please. This is a snapshot of today's North Dakota testing, and you can see that the number of test results for North Dakota was down, largely due from yesterday to today, largely due to the holiday weekend. So there were 33 new positive test results, and the total new individuals tested was just 454. Keep in mind that long-term care facilities and some other congregate settings have been serial testing frequently, so that's why you see so many individuals that have been retested at 784. The rest of that is data that you can look at your leisure, so I'll move on to the next slide, if you will, please, Greta. The next slide shows the counties that did report cases today, and Grand Forks County had 3. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Grand Forks data in a moment, but if you look at the bottom there, which shows our new active cases along with existing active cases, you can see we've had an upturn in both for the last 10 days or so, or 2 weeks, and we are currently now with the same number of active cases that we had on or around April 24th and on or around May 26th when you pull out that data and look at the website. Next slide, please. So Grand Forks County data, this hasn't been updated for today, and so there's a little bit of a lag, and I apologize for that, but we are somewhat dependent on the reporting at the State Health Department, and their lab has been pretty busy. But the total tests in Grand Forks County was 9,744 as of the last update. The total positive tests is current with 406. That represents about 9.5% of all North Dakota cases, and we've had 23 positive tests in the last 8 days. So I counted from last Monday to today. Our total recovered is 364, and our Grand Forks County deaths remains at 4. So there's a little bit of a bright spot in that our deaths have not increased for a number of weeks now. Next slide, please. This graph that you will see is information that we are able to pull from what's called our dynamic system. This is what's utilized for our contact tracing team when they enter information in on cases that are reported, and they do their investigation, and then they contact people throughout the course of their isolation period, and then eventually release them from isolation. However, this system was put in place in May 15th, so you don't see those large spikes that we had back in April when we had a significant outbreak. But what you can see is that from May 15th to today, we had a really nice decline. And then as more and more things have opened up and more activities are occurring, we're starting to see some spikes, and we're starting to see an increase in our cases per 100,000. This information we hope to refine further and get more information and combine it with some work that the Public Information Center is doing to help create more Grand Forks specific a page that people can look at the data. The next slide, please. This one also hasn't been updated, but I included it in here because it's a holdover from a previous presentation, and people are always interested in knowing what the sources of exposure are. And it remains that community spread is our largest source of exposure, meaning that people do not know where they came in contact with the virus. They've completed their investigation and haven't been able to identify back to a specific case that's either a member of their household or a close contact. And this is expected as more and more of the community activities open up and people are mixing and mingling. What we didn't see for a long time was confirmed travel or possible travel because people really were not traveling. But now that they are moving about and going to other states, we are starting to see those numbers increase a little bit. So hopefully by the next time I give you an update, we will begin to see, we'll be able to see what impact that travel is having. And the next slide, please. What I wanted to do was just fill you in on all of the things that the Grand Forks Public Health Department and our community have been involved in. Some of it is specific to our department, but some of it is quite specific also to the community and our many partners that we've been working with. Something that's relatively new since the last time I updated you is a testing strategy group that's been formed with our county partners. And this was in response to increases from the public wanting to know where they could be tested, and also to share best practices and information among all of the entities that are doing testing. So this includes Spectra Health, AllTrue, UND, Grand Forks Public Health Department, AllTrue, Northwood, Larimore, so various entities within our county that are all doing some kind of testing or have plans to do testing, and we're sharing information about what our upcoming activities will be. And they fall into some categories such as static diagnostic testing, which is what you can get at AllTrue or Spectra Health or Northwood Deaconess. UND has plans to put something in place. They have a plan, but that's not been fully rolled out yet other than their one sponsored large mass event. And then targeted testing is quietly going on behind the scenes. I would like to describe it in that way. Because it's really targeted testing that is addressing our most vulnerable people in our community, those people who are most likely to have transmission, such as long-term care facilities, group homes, congregate living settings, homeless shelters, and then also our Grand Forks County Correctional Center. We employ the staff, the nursing staff that works at the Correctional Center, and they've been through 2 rounds of testing thus far. Our department also assisted the North Dakota Department of Health with a serology testing event that was held by invitation for individuals in the community that had previously tested positive as part of a diagnostic test. And they did this for purposes of validating the instrumentation and reagents that they plan to use should serology testing be recommended on a larger scale. You can see the results of serology testing that's done by hospitals and clinics now. It's used for a variety of purposes. The Physicians Advisory Committee for the North Dakota Department of Health has not recommended using it for decision points for opening up more things, but certainly it does have some value in a healthcare environment. There have been about 5,000 serology test results submitted to the North Dakota Department of Health, with right around 200 that have been positive. And next slide, please. Probably what's been the most visible have been our mass diagnostic testing events. And I just listed them all because I know we have new members of the City Council and a new mayor and possibly new members of the public that are watching this evening. And so I just wanted to run through the numbers of large events that we've held and also the number of people that have been tested. This certainly would never be possible without the assistance of the North Dakota National Guard. They are a well-oiled machine and really have this process down. And they typically bring a large team that really helps us accomplish this. And even with all of our partners working together, it just wouldn't be possible without the National Guard. But there you can see all of our partners that are involved. It takes a lot of people to make these events happen. Our last one, the last 3 we did at UND on June 23rd with 1,000, June 30th at the Alaris Center with 1,000 individuals. And we know that we had to turn people away from that, and we apologize for that, but we had a limited number of tests that the lab was able to run. These events are largely driven by lab capacity. And then our next event is planned for July 15th at the Alaris Center. And due to comments that we've received from the public, we'll be offering this one from noon to 7 p.m. so that individuals who work during the day can come in the afternoon or evening. Next slide, please. These are just a couple of photos. Dr. Armacost is there, President Armacost, getting his test from one of our staff members, Chantel Vasquez. And there you can see a picture of our event at the Alara Center on June 30th. And that event, we wrapped the cars all the way throughout the entire parking lot and then all the way around the Alara Center out onto 42nd Avenue. So it unfortunately did result in some long waits. We apologize for that, but we know that once people got into the testing lane, they were able to be tested fairly quickly. One of the things that really helps us with mass testing events and that we plan to promote more is the use of an online registration, and then that allows us to register people and move the cars through much more quickly. So we're going to highly be encouraging that for our event next week. Moving on to the next slide then, some additional activities that we've been engaged in all along has been convening our pandemic planning community partners group. We have up to 40 members of this. We meet every 2 weeks now. We met weekly for a while, and we've been meeting since January, and it's a great place to share updates, latest information, best practices. We also stood up a local joint information center, and our members of that are people who are public information officers from the various organizations that attend, and we share social media message development, coordinate among the partners, share signage. The Public Information Center of the city has been really generous with sharing unique signage that's been developed. Obviously, news conferences have been held, and then tailoring information to specific audiences. And then you can see the Grand Forks Public Health communication activities are listed there, and then we also produce a situation report every week that you receive in your email. Next slide, please. This is just a further detailing of all the communication activities that have occurred, because we know a public health pandemic really requires great communication with the public so that they know what to do. They know what we're asking of them, how they can stay safe, how they can protect themselves, their families, and be safe in their workplaces. And so there's our general activities that are listed there. We've logged 63 North Dakota Smart Restart responses, and there you can see how that's broken down, the types of establishments. But I think this is highly underreported because many of the businesses have a regular inspector that they might meet with, and so they contact them directly, so they're not always logged into that system. But advice is being given out daily, several times a day. And the same would be true for hotline responses. We logged 462, but generally now people know where their source of information is. A lot of people contact me, and I don't always find the time to log those into the log at the end of the day. But you can see the types of calls that we get and where they're coming from. Vastly, it's the community members. And then the next slide, this is just an example of one of our communication messages. We're really promoting mask usage right now because it's been found to be very useful in preventing the spread, especially among people who are asymptomatic and maybe spreading the disease to others and not realize it. Masks are meant to protect others, not necessarily to protect yourself. Masks worn in a healthcare environment are to protect the healthcare workers, but also to prevent the spread between patients. But in the community, it's really a sign of respect, and it really helps us to keep businesses open so that we don't have to have another closure. And so that's what we're really trying to promote, is the use of masks, especially if you can't be 6 feet apart from others at that social distance space. And then I wanted to talk a little bit, next slide, about contact tracing efforts. At one point in time, we had a high of 15 individuals that were doing contact tracing when our caseload was much higher, but now it's down to 4, largely because all of our staff have other response efforts that they are attending to, such as the restart. or they have other programs that have restarted or resumed in the community. Our contact tracing efforts, though, are highly augmented by some other groups like other local public health departments, MPH students at UND and NDSU. But currently we have 22 active cases. We have 8 positive cases that we are currently following, 22 active cases, and then 141 have been recovered by our staff. 63 close contacts are being followed every day for 14 days, and 355 have been released from quarantine. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't line up with our total cases because of those other contact tracers. And if you look at the next slide, there it describes our regional partners that also have been engaged in this work. As I mentioned before, the Dynamics database has been in place since May 15. And the interesting thing about this is it's really helped us to conduct investigations across jurisdictions. Over the weekend, we had a very complex case of individuals that were reported out in Grand Forks because they had Grand Forks County addresses, but their contacts were across the state because they were temporarily living in other locations or were interacting with people in other locations, and our contact tracers were able to make that common connection and expand the number of contacts who may be at risk. The other thing that we're finding is that now that people are moving about more, is that we are noticing a greater number of contacts with each one of our cases. During times when things were closed, we might have 3 to 5 contacts. Now it's not at all uncommon to have 10, 20 or more, which exponentially increases the workload of the contact tracing team. And then something that has slowed down for us considerably, but was a big effort on the next slide, is our quarantine and isolation of individuals. As I've mentioned before, this was something that we started right away because we identified that people living in congregate settings would need an alternate place to safely quarantine or isolate. And so all of the services that we provide are listed there. We served approximately 25 people. There is nobody being served right now. And there we have listed all of our local partners. At one point in time, the state took over the contract with the hotel for this, so we were not using any anticipated city funding to do this, but their contract will end in July, so our local partners will be meeting to determine what actions we'll take moving forward and how we'll sustain that. And then on the next slide is our restart activities. I've mentioned this before, but it's largely been the responsibility of our environmental health staff to work with local businesses like bars and restaurants. And early on, when things began to open, they emailed all their licensed establishments with the information. We provided it to the chamber, to media outlets, and on social media. And I would say this is a bulk of our phone calls now, is people looking for information for some of those private events as well, in terms of size and so forth. We also address public concerns through contacts by email or phone. Sometimes that comes through our Facebook page. And as restarting has commenced, more entities also requested personal protective equipment or PPE fit testing. This ensures that they have a good fit for the masks that they're wearing in places like dental offices or group homes, and then the paratransit drivers that assist with our transportation for our isolation and quarantine. It's getting a little bit more challenging as the public believes that COVID is over. As you can see from the data, it's not over, and so we are doing a lot of work to educate about reopening. If you look at the next slide, we've been doing some consultation with Grand Forks County on the reopening of the county office building. Our offices remain closed to the public, but we have a limited number of staff there, but everybody has been working full-time from home or out in the community, and we have resumed a number of our services. Some were never discontinued. There's a long list there of things that have continued, and probably the one most people are wondering about, mosquito control. Never missed a beat. They are actively larviciding and now spraying as well. And our Withdrawal Management Center opened today. As I've mentioned before, we're planning for the future. And one of the things we're very concerned about is making sure we have good systems for administering flu vaccine this fall, because flu symptoms can be very similar to the SARS-CoV-2 or COVID. And so we have to make sure that we have a really good, robust vaccination program that will help us to practice what we need to do going forward when we have vaccine for the SARS-CoV-2. And then continuing on, the next slide are just our plans for enhancing the public health workforce. We're in the process of hiring public health nurses and public health program specialists. We've added one and we're recruiting for 6 more to help with contact tracing, isolation, quarantine, testing, data collection, dashboard development, and eventually vaccination. And then, as I mentioned before, we're resuming public health programs that will maintain community health and modifying our workplace and workflow. And I think that is all that I have, other than just resources at the end of the presentation on the hotline numbers and all of the resources. So as you just scroll through those last few slides, you'll see this information's been provided before, but it's all still really good information. And then I think that is the end. There's one of our social media posts showing some of our staff, our health officer, one of our staff members' children wearing their masks and protecting the public. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions from council members, Mayor Bochensky, if you have any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson. I think you and your team, as well as the National Guard, did a good job moving 1,000 people through the Alaris parking lot there on the 30th. Any questions, comments?
Yes, please.
Brett?
Yes, Ms. Swanson, I'm concerned that our current trends look very similar to what we saw in Arizona, Texas, South Carolina, Georgia, just about a month ago. Of course, that's not a clear indication, but it is concerning, and I'm especially concerned by what you just described in terms of contact tracing, that the number of contacts have increased tenfold or more from those who are testing positive. Specific questions I have, you mentioned targeted testing. Has LaGrave on First, the Housing First program, have they been included in that targeted testing process?
I do believe I'll check into this for sure, but I do believe they were offered testing through Spectra Health, and they certainly have been a part of the group that we've been concerned about and ensuring that they have it, but they probably would fall into the category of a group needing serial testing. And we're also in the process of working with Prairie Harvest. They have indicated an interest in having testing in all of their facilities as well, and we'll be using kind of a model of training their staff to do that, because they have nurses on staff.
Very good, thank you. And I perhaps I missed it, but the Pandemic Planning Community Partners Group, I don't recall having heard about that before. Are city staff, other than yourself or the mayor, are they included in this group?
Yes, it was initiated by our Public Health Emergency Preparedness team, Dustin Johnson and Marcus Lee. They've been meeting since January. Public Information Center usually attends. I've sent information to others, but I'll be happy to send our next invitation to all the council members if you'd like to participate.
Yes,
Absolutely.
please, very much. That'd be great, thanks. You mentioned serology testing. Mr. Phil Giesi's testing network has long included serology testing, but as you note, not as a distinct decision point, but only as a part of a global process of inquiry. Next, Mayor and Todd, and this is not so much a question for Ms. Swanson, but for Mayor Bochensky and Mr. Phelan. One of the city's major initial responses back in March was to host a series of listening sessions. These were open to the public, often 140 or more participants. It's been quite some time since we've done that. I'm wondering if it's time to do that again.
Mayor Bochensky and Councilmember Weber, I concur with you. We've done a lot of moving forward with actions, but not probably enough listening, and you helped facilitate those. So Mayor Buczynski, I think community development helps support those meetings. They were publicly available, so they were reported on, and with different segments of our economy, different segments and groups. And so I think it's good that we kind of do another circle around to see how people are doing now that it's midsummer as opposed to the spring when we really focused a lot on it.
I think people appreciated being listened to, having that chance to express themselves. There were some important policy changes came from those, and at this time I think it would be valuable to hear from them what has changed, what has been learned, and what needs do they have, what can the city do to further assist various sectors. Primarily we were looking at business owners across the community, but not just business owners, the various constituent groups. Finally, I think this is the third meeting we've had now since City Hall reopened, and or even before City Hall reopened, we had a meeting here. One of the things that brought me back in was the description that the dais was built for 14. We only have 7 these days, and there was lots of opportunity to spread out, and yet here we are. Hi, Jeannie. It's great to see Jeannie, but perhaps we could do what was said was going to happen when we first came back into council chambers and do some social distancing. Not only would it be good practice, it's good modeling for the rest of the community. It's one of the public health recommendations. That's all I've got. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Weber. Anybody, any other comments?
Mayor, this is Ken. I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Ken.
How long was the withdrawal management closed for?
I can get you the exact dates. I believe they closed on March 24th. And that was largely due to the fact that we did not have any physical separation for the staff from one another. They have a very tiny workspace. We've since modified that to create some additional space for them and allow them to work more safely side by side. Also, we can only admit one client per room now. We cannot cohort them, so it has reduced the number of people that we can serve on any one evening.
So are you seeing any impact across the city while it was closed that was detrimental, or how did things seem to work out?
No, that might be a question for the emergency room or the police department, because they would more likely have seen the impact of our not being open during that time.
Okay. Then one other completely different. Are we still being involved in the blue zone planning?
That's a good question. I will have to check in with my colleague Alan Anderson to find out where that's at right now. Okay. I think I received an email about it back in April sometime, and I will have Alan follow up with you, Ken.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I think Mr. Gengler had, I believe, a quick census update from our meeting this morning, so.
Yes, Mayor Buczynski. Council members, quick update on the census. Just this morning, we got word that the Census Bureau has resumed in-person interviews in 11 states. Still at a limited capacity, but it'll be on a need basis, but they still do want to rely on the either online or the telephone options. Some of the things that we're doing, considering the restrictions, I think tomorrow, the next day, we'll deliver several posters to the Housing Authority, for example, to start getting into some of their buildings that they manage and own, to start getting that word back out again. And as we focused on these numbers that we have for the national level, state, Grand Forks, I think the Herald did a positive article, I think, on Friday. But to make one point, I think that everybody should keep in mind when we see these percentages, they only represent the self-response, that being the online or the hard copy. So for example, right now, as of July 1st, the latest numbers on a national level, 61.8% self-response, whereas Grand Forks is at 67.8%. We still have 2 hard-to-count populations, UND and the Air Force Base, that we're still communicating with. However, group quarters, how they get counted runs from April 2nd to September 3rd, so we still have some time to However, it should be noted that even when those group corridors are accounted for, they won't be represented in that percentage, so there'll be some unknowns there probably for a while. And then lastly, just as a reminder, because of the COVID and the suspension of operations, now the results of the census will be provided to the president instead of December 31st of this year. It won't be until April 30th of 2021. That's all I have, if there's any questions.
Questions, anybody? Thank you, Mr. Gengler.
All right, we'll have 2.3 presentation to Finance Department Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the 2020 budget.
All right, the Finance Award, the City of Grand Forks Finance Department has received the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the 2020 budget from the Government Finance Officers Association. This is the 13th consecutive year that our Finance Department has been recognized for this award. In order to receive this award, the city had to satisfy nationally recognized guidelines for effective budget presentation, and receiving this award reflects the commitment of staff to meet the highest principles of governmental budgeting. Great work to Finance Director Maureen Storstad and Budget Officer Mike Vansdahl and the rest of the Finance Department for this accomplishment. It's great to see city staff get recognized for their hard work, and I'll give you the floor, Maureen, to say a few words if you'd like.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to just maybe hold up the plaque that we did receive and just say thanks. This is really the product of a lot of hard work and dedication, not just from myself, but it takes a team to put all this information together, including mayor and council, our finance staff, some of which are here tonight. Special thank you to Michael Vattenstall, helping put all this together. And we also have Candy Stern, Emily Fossen, Sherry Lummark with us tonight, but also to all finance staff. Also just want to say it's really the group behind me and to the right here with department heads that everybody works so well together and is all part of putting this together. So I wanted to just thank you.
Well, thank you to the Finance Department. You know, you guys. You put in some long days and you're putting in another one right now, so appreciate that. That'll finish 2. We'll move on to 3, public hearings and second readings of ordinances. Maureen.
3.1, public hearing and second reading of ordinance relating to penalty for specified offenses.
All right, we're going to open this up to the public. Any comments on this? No, any comments, Maureen?
No comments received in our office.
All right, can we get a motion to approve? Councilmember Weigel motions. Council Vice President Mock seconds. Any more questions, comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carries. On to number 4, action items. None of these were discussed at the Committee of the Whole, so we're going to pull all items 4.0 to 4.9 for discussion.
4.0, extension of public health emergency declaration.
Go ahead, Todd.
Mayor Buchenski and members of the City Council, as you guys have witnessed, we're still within the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we're requesting this evening is to extend the emergency declaration to the end of the year. Tonight is a night that it would extinguish if we don't do something this evening. Like I said, we're within the pandemic. This provides, we think, augmented arguments of why we should be reimbursed with some of our expenses because we have a local emergency ordinance ourselves. And it provides us flexibility in how we've been operating not only today, but what may happen over the next several months. Finally, we do have some mayoral emergency orders that are in place, and so without this declaration, those would go away. And so I think overall, we'd like to continue on to the end of the year. I suspect we'll be here near the end of the year if we do extend it to the end of the year, to extend it further into next year. And hopefully next year is the last year we have to deal with what we're dealing with currently. So with that, Mayor Buchenski, I know Mr. Gosted, it followed generally what we have prepared 2 times prior to the City Council, and we're asking for it to be extended to the end of the year.
Open it up to council members. Any discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Sandy, President Sandy.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Phelan, Mayor Buchenski, when Mayor Brown was here, we had quite a bit of conversations about the duration of the emergency declaration. And there were several times we had discussions about it's relatively easy to extend the declaration. The City Council, of course, can take back and can cancel the declaration as we wish. And one way or another, I don't think it necessarily matters whether we go for 2 months or 6 months, other than I, for one, would like to know, and I don't need to know it now, I'd like to know what our plan is for the executive orders that have been issued, because all executive orders were issued under Mayor Brown, and if, I'm guessing there's some discussion, or should be some discussion about whether we'll continue some of those executive orders, make some ordinance changes or not, specifically toward the liquor issues. And pushing this out for 6 months, I feel like that doesn't give us a reasonable deadline to bring some of these other issues to a head. I would prefer we go for a month. As I've said in the past, it can be on the first city council meeting of the month. I'm pretty sure our staff has the wherewithal to add the item to the agenda. I guess I'm okay if others want to go longer than that. It doesn't particularly matter. What I do know is the shorter the emergency declaration, the more angst there is for us to bring some of the other issues to a head, have those discussions at city council meetings, and make sure that we are getting the true public input that I think we should, related to specifically some of those liquor issues. So I'm prepared to move forward with it one way or another. I just want to make sure that we're going to have some discussion on those executive orders in the relative near term, so that we have an idea of what people's intentions are.
Yeah, I don't think that changed anything with having discussions about the executive orders. They're all in continuation until they're stopped or until the emergency declaration ends. It doesn't matter really to me. There's ease to end a emergency declaration and ease to extend it, so I guess I'll defer to the other council members' decision there. Go ahead, Mr. Weigel.
Thank you, Mayor Buczynski. I spoke last time when Mayor Brown wanted to extend the emergency declaration. I spoke against the time length. I thought that was too long. I'd like shorter rather than longer, due to the fact that we can come back, we can always extend it. But I think when we extend it for 6 months, what we're doing is we're telling the public that in 6 months from now, we are still going to be under an emergency order. That's what the headline is when it hits the news. So I think shorter is better for the public. We revisit it every month. It's always at the top of our agenda early on in the month. We can extend it if we need to, but I don't like the optics of a 6-month emergency order, because we don't know when that can change.
I think that's fine. If you look at the next in August, it would be August 3rd, would be the first council meeting. So if you want a motion, move to August 3rd. I don't think we need an amendment, so that would just be the motion. Mr. Weber.
I'm a little concerned that it was set to expire tonight. If something had happened and we weren't able to meet, or there'd been some oversight, some failure to catch it tonight, that we ran that risk. Can we go to the middle of the month, extend it to the middle month with a renewal intended for the beginning of each month?
So
we're not taking it to the midnight hour like this.
Do you want to do it on a council still on August 17th, or should we give it a day or two after, just so there's a little leeway in case of meeting?
I'd be okay for extending it the first meeting in August, but having it currently extended to the middle of August. I just want to avoid the kind of midnight appointment situation that we're in right now.
Mayor Buczynski, I'd even be okay with 2 months. We can revisit it at that. I just think 6 months is a little long. So if you want to do till September, I'd be okay with that, middle of September.
Because this is important for all those federal resources, et cetera. We don't want to have a lapse in this declaration. Sorry for interrupting there.
Nope, so the first council meeting would be the 7th of September. Do you just want to do September 15th? That'd give us we can do it that week. We'll have an extra week in case we got to move it. So if someone wants to motion to do September 14th.
Just one, and so the intent would be to renew it prior, we wouldn't wait till the day?
Exactly.
Correct, okay. I would move approval.
So we have a motion to approve on extending the emergency declaration until September 14th. Councilmember Weber seconds. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
4.1, appointments, reappointments to various committees, including Pension Insurance Committee, the Employee Representative reappointment, Airport Authority reappointment, and the Grand Forks Historic Preservation Commission reappointments.
Go ahead, Todd.
Regarding Pension and Insurance Committee, that's Darren Shimke. We're asking he's a long-time firefighter for Grand Forks, well thought of within the employee ranks. B, under Airport Authority reappointment, that would be a reappointment of Carl Bollingberg, and Mayor Boczynski met with Carl and is asking for him to be reappointed. And then finally, Historic Preservation, these are all continuing appointments. Chuck Flemmer, Gordon Eisminger, Sandy Slater, and Bill Kelleher, all members that wish to be reappointed to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Yeah, like you said, these are all reappointments, so if there's any discussion or we want a motion to approve.
Move approval.
Got a motion from Mr. Wagle and a second from Mr. Council President Sandy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
4.2, appointment to city council members to various committees.
It'll be you again, Todd.
Mayor Boczynski, we followed the lead of yourself along with Council President Sandy. We put together a list of new appointees and continuing appointees as part of the staff report, thanks to Spencer and the mayor and city administrator's office. So we think we've aligned with where the appointments were supposed to be and also the reappointments that are need to be acted on tonight for the month of July. We've also included an updated full list of committees and other things that groups that where city council members are part of. Some of those are not up for discussion tonight, but we included the ones that need to be appointed tonight, including it with our new council member Gavami tonight.
Council President Sandy, do you have anything to add?
No, I think we're all prepared to get to work, and so it should be a good list, and I appreciate everyone's willingness to be flexible on their committee appointments.
Vice President Mock, anything? All right, do we need discussion or can we motion?
I'll move, but also thanks for all the work. It's a lot of puzzle solving to get this put together. So to both Council President and Vice President Mock, thanks.
We have a second? Second, Mr. Sandy. Unless there's further discussion, we will take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
4.3, special event 2020 Rockin' Up Northfest.
Cheryl, that'll be your turn.
I'm Cheryl Simeone. I'm with the Public Information Center. Welcome, Mayor and council members. For Mayor and Councilmember Kwame. Our office, the Public Information Center, works as a one-stop shop for event organizers. We ask that they bring us their event information, and if there are elements of their request that require approval by council, we will bring them forward, which is what I'm doing today. The application was brought forward from Tricia and Jamie Lunsky. They are both here tonight too to answer your questions. And they are asking for a noise variance and special license for commingling. Commingling in the fact that they will be 21 and older and 21 and younger, so wristbanding the actual participants. We've also gotten a request from Public Health to ask for their safety plan for COVID-19. And in your staff report, you will be able to see that there is a 2-page safety plan there that they have provided us that they will be utilizing for their event. I also think it's interesting to note too that even though the event spans over 3 days, the actual hours, the first day, the August 20th, is a family-free movie night for 3 hours. The second day is from 4:30 to 11, which is 6.5 hours, which is a country western concert with, I believe it's Diamond Rio. And then the second night, again, 6.5 hours with Joe Nichols, I believe. So that is what they are planning, and they would like our permission to hold commingling, subject to their approval, subject to public health, yes.
So I think what's really up here is the noise variance and the special license to commingle, but I think we also have to realize that this could be shut down if CDC guidelines or public health guidelines change going prior to that. So there may be some investment made by them to have this happen, and it may not happen. But I think they have this plan on here. It's a pretty good start, and I do think there were some council members that wanted to make a statement on that.
One thing I do want to mention, I completely forgot, as Todd reminded me, is that the safety plan that they've given us is a snapshot. It's a snapshot of today. It's not August 20th, but it is definitely their snapshot of what we know today of COVID-19. and they are aware that adaptability is going to be needed by the time, either more or less, depending upon where we are at when this event comes. And maybe what I could do is invite them to come on up, and they could even speak to for their own action that they want to do. Thank you.
They've been waiting patiently.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Council.
We take it very seriously, so we completely understand if we cannot have this event, if it's not a safe way to have it, we won't push that. So we're intending to move it from Minnesota to North Dakota, so it is something new for North Dakota also.
We're just trying to put something to work, so if everything does line up and we are able to have the event, we just want to make sure we have all the other parts in place. We understand that there's a lot of unknowns right now, and we're just keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, I think a lot can change between now and August 20th, so any comments, questions?
With recognition of those contingencies and that level of flexibility, I'll move approval.
Okay, do we have a second?
I do have some comments, if you would.
Yeah,
Mayor
please,
Buczynski.
Ms. Dockler. We have a second, but then let's go to your comments.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the Linskys could share with us why is the interest in moving it to North Dakota from Minnesota, when for the last few years it's been held across the river?
North Dakota, when Minnesota was locked down and they weren't making any movement early on, so we've been working on this for a couple months. We were using Grand Forks as a backup site because we thought North Dakota had better numbers and more flexibility, and we're just trying to look at all options to try to if we can bring events to the community and get people to do something in a safe manner, we'd like to do it.
And we also had a grand plan of leaving the stage up from August 20th to September 14th through the Greenway Takeover Festival, possibly renting it out to spa or other people
Other
who
places
need it.
who had indoor events that they couldn't do, we could move them outdoor in a safer manner. So we're just exploring all kinds of options right now.
I'm also wondering too, has Public Health had an opportunity to sit down with you and go over the safety plan that you've proposed for the event?
The discussion has been, it's just, there's more unknowns than knowns right now until we get closer to the event. It's a lot of, we just don't know, no one knows, and that's really the problem.
And I think something good that Home of Economy Food Truck Festival had 12 to 15,000 people. That's our attendance for our whole festival. So it would be a lot less than that, and they went off without a hitch, so I think that's encouraging too.
And my motion was recognizing the contingency and that you're going to be ongoing in your collaboration with the health department.
So I guess some of the other questions that I have too for the festival are that I know it's over a few different days. It does coincide with UND welcoming back all of the students into the community. And so I'm wondering, have you also had conversations with UND and their administration about how this may impact some of the kind of guidelines and strictures that they're putting on for their students to ensure their safety for COVID-19?
We have not had a conversation with UND at this time.
Is that something that you would be open to doing?
Oh, absolutely.
I just think that it's important for us to, we just had them here actually earlier in the meeting at the JDA, talking about our collaboration and moving forward as a community. I think that this is one of these things where really that conversation needs to happen, especially since this could potentially be one of the first big events to happen in Grand Forks in the age of COVID. And really it would be, what is if you could share with me, what is the kind of population demographic that you're really looking to hit? I know that the first day is for families and movies, but then for the concerts.
It's really a 21 plus event, and any age is welcome, but I don't think up north is more of a country concert, so the typical range is 21 to, I'm not going to say 60 and exclude 61-year-olds, but so anyone who likes country music.
I guess my concern with that is that it kind of targets then our most positive diagnosed population in Grand Forks, and it's pretty broad, I'll give you that, like the 25 all the way up to 40. But that's who we have seen coming out positive with COVID the most. And so it is a little worrisome to me to think that we're going to have this big event, even though it's outside, and putting all of these people together in the same space.
And we understand all that. We just have to keep planning these things. We can't wait until a week before and everyone says we can do stuff and it's too late. So we're just making our planning right now.
We got a comment from Councilmember Kwame.
I'm just curious, commingling issues, have you had any issues with that in the past?
Never.
Okay, so, and that's what we're here to talk about right now, right? Yeah. And assuming that everything moves forward as planned, would public health or the council be privy to the action plan as we get closer to the actual event?
Of course.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
We got one more comment, go ahead.
Sorry, so I did receive an email earlier today from Ms. Alberts, who is the director of the Writers Conference at UND. She had some significant concerns. Most notably, one of her comments in her email was that she's sure that you will encourage social distancing, which of course you will. Two-part question. First of all, how are you going to deal with if at the last minute, maybe it's an internal question, who actually makes the final say if we get toward the end? Who says that you can't go? But what could you say to Ms. Alberts to make her feel confident that you're going to do everything you can to make sure that we keep people in our community
We'll do
safe?
everything we can to work with the public health, and if we can't come up with a happy compromise when we get closer to that date, then the event will be canceled.
I think it's like masks, 2 months ago masks weren't a thing, now they are a thing. So whatever it is in 5 weeks, we will
If it
work.
can be managed, we'll take actions.
Great, thank you.
I think enforcement's kind of been an issue throughout this whole COVID thing. How do we enforce different things? And I think, people have to make choices too when it comes to these events, whether they participate or not. And I appreciate and excited that you guys are willing to go forward when you're the first, so you're kind of the test subject here. Go ahead, Ms. Mock.
This is maybe more of an internal, but who does make that call for an event not having to happen? Is that the governor's call that then comes down based on CDC guidelines?
Yeah, if they're not outside of the guidelines, that's going to be their call. So they have to provide something that's safe. And like I said, enforcement is a tough issue on this one, and I think it's been a tough one from the beginning. So
From what we understand, the county public health overrules the governor.
So it's the county public health and what the county is doing. Okay. And then I guess for our other events, are we just requiring that safety plan for all events being submitted? Okay. I'm getting a nod.
any other comments? Or I believe we have a motion set forward. So seeing no more comments, let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
4.4, request from HB presents to preserve event festival area in Greenway from August 15th through mid-September.
Mayor, members of council, I'm Kim Greendahl. I'm the Greenway Specialist for the City of Grand Forks. And what you have in this request is kind of was alluded to in the last discussion. HB Presents is interested in not just setting up for the Rockin' Up North Festival, but also for the Greenway Takeover Festival. It gets really expensive. If you've ever been to the festival, it's a big stage and it takes a lot of work. So I give them a lot of credit for saying, let's be creative, let's extend that a little bit. In order to do that, we needed to have some kind of an agreement to protect both sides of the agreement. I have been working with Dan on our agreement to make sure that the city's protected as far as liability or injuries, maintenance, those kinds of things. But basically what they're asking for is the use of that space that they hold the festivals in. If someone wants to hold an event during that time, they would work through HB Sound and Lights and HB Presents, but they also have to complete a special events form with our city to make sure that they're meeting all of those requirements about alcohol and noise variances, and those kinds of things. So that's kind of the basis of it.
Thank you. Mr. Gostad, you're comfortable with the liability on the city looking at the contract?
Yes, and I've worked through with Ms. Greendahl the terms and conditions, made some modifications to it. It's what I call a revocable license, which allows the city to revoke it at any time on written or oral notice. So it kind of addresses some of the issues that were raised earlier. It does require that they pay for all the costs and expenses for a safe environment. And make sure that they oversee and have necessary precautions in place, and there are liability protections and indemnity clauses in favor of the city that were added as a result of my review.
All right, council comments?
Yes, first of all, Mr. and Mrs. Linsky, thanks for your courage in moving forward with this, recognizing that it could come down to the 0 hour and you have to cancel. We talk a lot about the challenges faced by restaurants right now, and they're dealing with some very tricky, tough times. But outdoor event promoters such as yourselves, this has been a particularly tough time. And for you to bet on Grand Forks in this way and to move forward, as you said, this isn't something you can do, you can wait until the last moment. I believe you've been working on this creative idea of the semi-permanent stage for some time. I think that's a fantastic idea. Ms. Greendahl, thanks for your work on this as well, and for your openness to this idea. So just thank you. That's all I wanted to say, and I'll move approval.
We have a second. Councilmember Weigel seconds. All those in favor, do we have any other comments?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ms. Mock.
Yeah, just very quickly, I'd like to say a couple of things too. I think there's some real advantages to what Lunskys are doing here, to both Jamie and Tricia, because, you know, one of the great ways to actually get together in groups is outside. And I think that there's a real benefit to having this set up for the long term outside, and especially as Mr. Weber said, the risks that are involved with it. So I think it opens up opportunities that we wouldn't have any other way. So that's very much appreciated. I think the concern I have is with the enforcement of the, sometimes the social distancing and the like. So I'm very interested to see how we can have it a win-win, where we can maintain the distancing that we need, and attract people to the Greenway and have the separation that we're looking for. So I'm hoping that can work out so that it actually doesn't put more people at risk than what is intended.
Thank you, Mr. Veen. Ms. Mock?
I was just going to ask, are there any concerns about the stage being out there for people falling off or vandalizing it? Are we fairly confident that it'll be safe if we leave it out there? Or reasonably, you're willing to take the risk?
The area is fenced off during that time, so.
Okay.
And we'll take down all of our equipment, such as speakers, lights, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so it's just a stage and...
Yeah.
And it'll be fenced off, and if someone crosses that fence, and then we address that.
I think on the city side, I think Mr. Gostad's going to give us the green light on that.
We've included provisions regarding indemnification and liability coverage. They're assuming all risk. It doesn't mean that the city might not be part of it, but they've assumed all the risk of loss in that regard.
Any other comments? Let's move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
4.5, Community Government Relations Officer Separation Request.
Tangi?
Good evening, Mayor, Council President Sandy, members of the council. What you have before you is a request to approve a provision in the termination agreement for former Community Government Relations Officer Pete Haga. As you heard earlier from Mayor Bochensky, Pete Haga had agreed to waive the 90-day delay from date of election termination provision contained in his employment contract. Waiving this provision eliminated approximately 10 additional weeks of salary, equating to approximately $20,000. As part of this termination agreement, Mr. Haga did request the additional payout of a $183.11 vacation hours for the sum of right over or 9323.96, which he did earn, but were subject to rollover limits under his employment agreement. The language specific to this provision is included in your staff report. Approval of the city council is required for this provision. Any contract-related comments or questions can be directed to City Attorney Dan Gosted.
I'd also like to open up, anybody just wanted to say anything? I know Pete was here for a long time. He handled the transition very smoothly, very well, very professionally. Certainly an impressive man. I know some of you had some close contact. So if anybody wanted to either speak to this or just to say a few words about Pete, I'd like to open up for that.
Mayor Buczynski, I'll move approval. I think he's earned those hours, he's earned that pay, and it's only right that he gets it.
We have a second. So we have a motion by Mr. Weigel and a second by Mr. Fahmy.
I would second that, but could I say a few words as well?
Sure.
So, like I said, I did want to say a few words just to honor Pete and the community building that he engaged in throughout the years in which Grand Forks and its residents directly benefited. I've had the great privilege to work alongside him on various projects and events, as did many others, and look forward to, well, perhaps in a different capacity, continuing in the future to make Grand Forks more welcoming together. I just wanted to thank Pete for his willingness to listen and to collaborate, to not just make space for others with an invitation, but in including them in the building of the table. It is this kind of deliberate inclusivity and Pete's willingness to cultivate new leadership that really it gave me an opportunity to feel like I belonged in Grand Forks and that I could make a difference. And I know that that is the same for many other people in the community as well. We'll miss his quiet leadership, and I'm very grateful that I was able to work alongside with him and thank him for his time, because truly Grand Forks is cooler because of Pete.
Thank you, Ms. Dockler. Any other comments?
I think, thank you, Mayor Buczynski. It's really hard to put into words the effort and time people have put into our community, the dedication, the selfless dedication. I think Mr. Hega, for most people that know him and know the time that he put in and all the events that he attended and all the effort that he provided, I would venture to say that Pete Hega epitomizes the spirit of Grand Forks, and I certainly will miss his work ethic outside of traditional government hours.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. Any other comments? Otherwise, we'll move to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
4.6, respread special assessments in newly annexed area, Southern Estates, 12th edition.
We have Emily Fossen. Ms. Fossen, please.
Good evening, Mayor Buczynski and Sandy, President Council, and council members. This is just a request to respread special assessments that were attached to a strip of land that has now been part of a new development called Southern Estates 12th edition. And the property owners have made the request that all of the special assessments be attached to the whole edition. And we can do this through the North Dakota Century Code and also through the request of the property owners, because there isn't anybody else involved in it. And we brought it to the commissioners and they all approved it too. They were looking for that there was benefit to this new annexed area, and there is. So that's all this is. It's just a request to respread the special assessments.
I think it's important to note that it's the same owner that owns all the properties, so he's not transferring to anybody else. He's just containing it within his properties separately. Do you have any comments on that, or can we move?
This is Ken Dean. I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Ravine, a second by Kwame. Any other comments? We'll move to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
4.7, plans and specifications for Project 8236, Greenway Bike Path Asphalt Repair, North Pedestrian Bridge to 7th Avenue North.
Mr. Grasser, please.
Thank you. Mayor Pochensky, members of City Council. This item here is relatively simple, a bike path overlay in the Greenway. This segment of the bike path was built in 2003, so we've gotten plenty of years of life out of it. The project is putting an 1.5-inch overlay on basically about 1.8 miles, I believe, of bike path. And this is something you'll probably see popping up regularly year after year as we continue to do maintenance in the Greenway bike paths. It's approving plans and specs at this point in time. And we'll take it out to bid and bring back approval to the City Council.
Questions, comments?
I think this is a great use of the Flood Protection Capital Maintenance Fund, of which everyone that's annexed into the city is now paying their special assessments into that fund. I'm glad we set it up that way. Whoever was smarter than me back in the day figured it out, so this is great. I will move approval.
Second from Mr. Weber. Any other comments or move for a vote? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
4.8, environmental decision document for Project 8059, paving North Columbia Road overpass to University Avenue.
Mr. Grasser, you again.
Thank you, Mayor, member City Council. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going over some history and background on this, on the process of the project, more so than the project itself. The decision you make tonight is actually very, very simple. We'll get to that at the end. This project is utilizing federal dollars under a program that we call the Urban Aid Program through the state of North Dakota. They're passed through federal dollars. We initially asked for these funds in December of 2016. And so it gives you an idea how long the time lag is from when you start asking for money until you start receiving the dollars. The project is scheduled to be constructed in 2021. It'll be bid this fall. The original project envisioned reconstructing Columbia Road, and the extent of this, and I'll refer you to a drawing a little bit farther back in your information packet that gives the exact extent and general layout of the project, but it begins at the Columbia Road overpass and proceeds north through University Avenue. The process we're at right now is what they call the environmental document. The one before us today is a categorical exclusion, or CAT-X. This is actually the simplest, most straightforward environmental document and can be used on projects such as this that are essentially contained within the footprint of the roadway itself. The project, as envisioned right now, is a complete reconstruction, taking the road out, new lighting, new roads, new storm sewer, bike paths, sidewalks, everything. Is basically, that's included in alternative B, as in boy. Alternative A would be to do nothing. Those are basically the two choices on the decision today. I do want to talk about a little bit, there's a pedestrian underpass in there that's been in terrible shape for a number of years. This thing is going to be completely rehabbed, all new mechanical, electrical systems. Generally speaking, about the only thing we're going to keep there is going to be the tunnel itself and the stairways. Everything else is going to be rehabbed, totally new. So that's one of the big ones. We have had a public information online virtual public comment period on it. That closed July 3rd. We didn't get any public comments. However, we have met with the University of North Dakota, and they have indicated to us they'd like to see some lighting that would correspond essentially with what's going on with University Avenue, so that fits that theme, and we should be able to accommodate that request when we get into the plans and specifications part of it. It's a bit of an aside, but as part of this project, it's not part of your decision-making document tonight, but while that roadway is being removed, there is some underground that needs to be redone. UND will be paying for a steam line replacement in there, and the city, under our sanitary sewer funds, will be replacing a force main. Again, these are old pipes that are under the road. Now is definitely an opportune time to fix that up, get them up to speed so we don't have to tear the road up to go down and get at that stuff. So that'll be part of the project, again, funded through different funding sources, but it's not part of the decision tonight, it's just kind of an FYI, that's all part of it. So, again, the item before you tonight is under the categorical exclusion decision document is either alternate A, to do nothing, or alternate B, which is to do the reconstruction activities that I just got done describing. So staff is recommending alternative B, the reconstruction.
Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Let's start with a question, Mr. Weigel, please.
Just real quick, I think this is a great project, long overdue. If you hit some of the corners right, it's like you're at Daytona International Speedway. So it's great that we're going to get this done and taken care of, and I'd be more than happy to move approval.
We have a second?
I'll second with the question, if I may.
Yeah, please.
The pedestrian underpass, you said stairs. Is there any way to make this ADA compliant? Can it be a long ramp, or is that just not possible?
Technically, the crossing is ADA compliant because there is an at-grade crossing that's available in addition to the underground. The practical application with the how flat the slopes and things have to be carried out, it just can't. It goes back a long ways. You'll see in some communities, especially if you're going up in the air, you might see these spirals and things like that. But of course, going underground here, I think the short answer is there really isn't a practical application to be able to do that.
Very good.
And this is also going to remove that little hitch that's in there. People come up to that light sometimes and they go straight into the wrong lane. Is that going to remove that little?
Yeah, it will make it much better than it currently is. We still have, there's an alignment change that happens there, but if you look at the drawing, it does take that, it modifies that curve quite a bit, because I know that is definitely a problem north and southbound as you go through there. So this will modify that and make it a more natural curvature for the drivers.
Mr. Connie, please.
Mr. Grasser, I'm hopefully going to only ask you this question once. Just first time to have this presented, but just curious, if you look back at November 2019, how did we contract KLJ? What was the process for that?
If you don't mind, I'll give you two different answers. I'll give you your answer first, but then there's an aside to it also. This particular project, because of the size and scope of the project, we do the full-blown advertising for services, professional services. We put together a selection committee. We go through a selection process. The consultants will submit documents on their qualifications, and then we'll move from there into essentially interviews. And the consultant committee will make that determination. Again, we're doing because of North Dakota State statutes, we do a qualification-based selection. So you select the best qualified, what you feel is the best qualified, and then you open negotiations as far as the dollars. We do that process on basically all of the larger projects, certainly anything that has federal or state funding on it. So that's the answer, the direct answer to your question. The other one to be aware of is on smaller projects, we do, about every 3 to 4 years, we do go out and ask architects, engineers, others to give us qualifications as to projects they might be interested in. There's a large list of projects, large list of consultant activities. We will pick off of that list sometimes on smaller projects if we have less time to react and things like that. The process that I just described on this is cumbersome. It takes a lot of staff time. It takes a lot of consultant time to put these things together. So again, on smaller projects, you may hear us make reference that, we picked a consultant off the consultant list. So that's kind of a separate process that we didn't use here.
Perfect.
And you will hear about it.
And who is on that committee that handles the negotiations?
I don't know for positive. Usually we have a couple of people from the engineering department. We'll have one or two from like the DOT. Sometimes we'll have the MPO. And they will go through the actual negotiating of the contract. Then comes back into the engineering department that reviews the scope of work and the dollars attached to it. But the selection will go through the committee.
Sure. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments? Go ahead, Ken.
Masters, thank you, Mayor. I'm going to assume when they redo this section of the roadway, they should take into account the expansion issues that we're currently having on the edges. and realign those joints and maybe even look at a different type of expansion? Would that be true?
I think this is a different section of road, isn't it?
This actually does, the expansion joint problem we're having is on the northerly section, which would tie into this. I don't know, Councilman Veen, if I can really answer your question, because I think a much is going to depend on what happens when the consultant comes through and reviews, and we'll see if this thing will go back to operating without a lot of effort on our part, or if we actually have to go in there and start cutting out structural members to make this thing fit. So there's a couple of paths that I see. If everything works out and we can wait until this project comes together, we may add this as part of the project. I'm afraid 50-50 chance we won't be able to wait that long.
Okay, my other question had to do with the pedestrian underpass. Do you know how much utilization that path gets at this time? I know, it was intended, obviously, for people to get underneath the street there, but there's other options that are available now, too. I'm kind of interested, and maybe this is beyond the category of exclusion you're looking for, but be interested to know how much is utilized, it's got to be pretty costly, and what the safety is of people going through that tunnel. I don't know if there's anything you can answer, but maybe it's more of an observation.
Councilman Veen, we definitely have, we can pull some of that information out of the traffic study in the report, and we can provide that information as a quick email to City Council. Mark Walker's out of town. If we can have, a couple days to do that. I will say that the number, I don't know the numbers, but I will say the number of pedestrians using that underpass was a surprisingly large number to me at the time when we were talking about it.
Okay, and just one last comment, and I don't know, it's again on the embankment as you come up the bridge. I think you and I had a brief discussion today, but it seemed to me that that was a different type of embankment with reinforced earth, if I remember right. Is that going to be relooked at as a part of this project too?
Councilman Veen, the consultant has taken a look at that, and they feel that the activity associated there right now is not something that has to be addressed. They think the retaining wall is stable. We are definitely going to take a look at it, though, during construction. That could be one of the things that pop up in construction that, when you start examining things underground, unknowns. But to this point, we're not anticipating having to rebuild that.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Otherwise, we're moving the environmental decision document on alternative B is the motion. So all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Grasser.
Thank you.
Last action item is 4.9, consideration of bids 2020-37, Public Works Operations Landfill Refuse Compactor.
Loretta, thank you for your patience.
Good evening, Mayor Bochensky, President Sandy, members of the council. The staff report outlines the particulars regarding the consideration of the bids for a replacement landfill refuse compactor, including background information, bid tabulation information, the 2020 sanitation budget line item for the first payment of 5 on a capital lease, and some machine literature. We're replacing a 2011 landfill refuse compactor, and it's a critical main piece of equipment in our daily operations at the landfill. And so with that, staff recommends approval of the landfill refuse compactor bid and award bid to Titan Machinery Incorporated as per the attached bid tabulation. Authorize staff to secure financing for capital lease and proceed with purchase, including trade-in and financing upon review and approval by the finance department and also the city attorney.
Council questions, comments? Got a motion to approve from President Sandy, a second from Kwame. Any other questions or comments?
I've never bought a landfill compactor before, so.
Do we expect to get more than 9 years out of the next one, or is that kind of the
You
term?
know, they recommend 5 to 6, so we've had this one for plenty amount of time, and it's starting to show it, and we're starting to spend some money on that old machine, so we need to get that moving.
All All right, I think on that, we're ready for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 5, we're done with action items. Informational items, looks like we have none. So I'll move on to number 6, citizen comments. Let's open this up to the public first. Did we have any public comments? Doesn't look like it. Maureen, any comments?
And we have received no comments, thank you.
We'll move on. Number 7, approval of minutes and bills.
7.1 is the vendor list and engineer's estimate as presented.
Todd, did you have something?
I'm
Okay.
getting ready for the next one.
We've got a motion.
I'm trying to move things along.
We have a second to pay the bills. Councilmember Weber, I don't think we have any comments or questions, so I'll take it to a vote. Those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed? The same. All right,
And
motion carries.
7.2, we do have minutes from May 18th attached.
All right, did we want to?
So we would just need a motion to
Want
approve
a
the
motion
minutes.
for that, the same. We have a motion, it looks like Danny's given the nod for a second, so let's take that right to a vote. Those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Well, number 8, Mr. Phelan, City
Mayor
Administrator
Buczynski and
comments.
members of City Council, 3 items. With the new incumbent president of the JD, if we could target July 20th, that would be a Monday, to bring the UND Nistler School agreement back. If everyone's okay with that, that would be the target. If I could work with Mr. Gosted and bring an agreement back.
Ideal.
That would be what I'd target.
If they're able to break ground this year, that would be fantastic on many
Okay,
fronts.
so
yes,
our plan
please.
will be to bring that back in 2 weeks for final approval.
Good.
Number 2, Maureen sent out some information on budget meetings. We're going to start those next Monday, and Council President Sandy, we'll just put that as part of the committee of the whole as one agenda item for next week, to get that kicked off here in July. And then finally, UND partnerships. I've written down like 5 or 6 things that people have brought up. So as part of working with Mayor Buczynski, we'll take off on some of those concepts, moving forward with further partnerships and continue to work on that. And we didn't, it wasn't noted, but Al just talked about Columbia Road. That's a UND partnership right there that we fail to forget. And once we're all said and done over the next 2 years, we're going to have all the streets in and around the University of North Dakota, all are going to be redone. And so we've made a lot of investments in and around campus, so we shouldn't forget those notes too. So with that, thank you, Mayor Buczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Moving on to number 10, council members, any comments?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Vice President Mock, comments? President Sandy?
Yeah, I had a few comments, actually. Thank you, Mayor. Getting back to the Nistler building, I want to make sure that I was clear when I said my words earlier. Of course, unfortunately, President Armacost is no longer here, but I think the goal of the University of North Dakota is to have students come to the university, and a new business school will help drive students to campus. As I mentioned earlier, there is no better way to capture local students than give them the opportunity for dual credit, and not just the opportunity for dual credit, but allow those students, our juniors and seniors in high school, to actually attend classes at the University of North Dakota. It's already being done at 3 other universities in the state of North Dakota. I would encourage our university to dedicate themselves to making that happen, because what better way to capture our local young people than get them invested in our university early. I would like to know, of course, Ms. Swanson isn't here in person, but there was a lot of discussion about HB and about social distancing and about making sure people are safe and how do we have concerts and things? How do we have people gathering and make sure that people are safe? Data is always hard to refute. I would like some data related to hospitalizations. I'd love to know what percentage of people that test positive for COVID actually end up in our local hospital. From that, we can extrapolate how many beds are there available at our local hospital, and in which case, how many people testing positive in our community is it actually going to take to overrun our hospital? I'd really like to know that. I think if we know approximately how many people at some degree in our community get sick, and from that, how many get hospitalized, and therefore we can actually have an understanding of at what point is our hospital going to be overrun. And from that, that will help us, I believe, make reasonable decision as to whether we should allow people to gather in concert settings outside, for example. I would also like to mention that the city of Grand Forks with all due respect to all the very hardworking people in the city of Grand Forks, we continue to prove that we are very poor landlords. We should not be owning buildings if we cannot hold people to leases or ask questions about having the lessors paying for infrastructure that they should be paying for. I really look forward to the time when we sell every building that we own. Last question is, perhaps it's rhetorical, but I'm interested to know how many other people that work for the city of Grand Forks are currently carrying too much vacation time. Because we had a lot of long discussion about vacation time, and we paid people out of extra vacation time. And so all I'm going to say is, I hope we can pay, if anybody else has too much vacation time today, let's get that off the books. We wanted it off the books because we didn't want to carry the accounts payable. Let's fix that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, President Sandy. Todd, you got some work to do there. I think getting dual credit up to number 1 on that list is a start. Outside of that, I just want to say thank you. It's the first meeting, first full council meeting, and it went pretty long, but we got everything done. So thank you to everybody that's here and stuck it out. With that, need a motion to adjourn.
Mayor Bochensky?
Oh, yes. Did you have something, Ms. Stockler?
I did actually, thank you. I think President Sandy was reading my mind because I really appreciate him bringing up the PSEO option, post-secondary education option. I was actually a benefit of that when I grew up in Minnesota, and it was really beneficial to me and to many of my other fellow classmates at the time. I think it would be an awesome opportunity for our students in Grand Forks to be able to get some of that experience, but then also credits that they can carry on to their future degrees, wherever that may be, hopefully the University of North Dakota. But then also, President Sandy brought up COVID, and it's really important that we not become complacent in how we understand COVID-19 right now. It isn't over. I know that it is tiresome and weary. I've been home with my kids since March. I totally understand this. My husband's been home as well. We'd like to go out and we'd like to do things, but I think we have to make sure that we're doing it safely, that we're doing it smartly, that we're taking measures, not just to protect ourselves, but also the other people in our community. Because Grand Forks, part of the reason why I love living here, and I think a lot of other people love living here, is because of this sense of community that we have, that we care about one another, and that we're willing to go the extra mile for one another. And that conversation is really important as we look at COVID-19 and the measures that we're taking. We may not necessarily always agree with one another, but that doesn't mean that we can't or we shouldn't continue to have these conversations. Because truthfully, if you look at the U.S. nationally, this isn't over. It's really just starting to begin again, with other states closing down on their phase 2, essentially, of closing down their states. We don't want that in North Dakota. We certainly don't want that in Grand Forks. So we do need to be very measured and take some critical eyes at how we're opening and how we're proceeding forward. So I would really just press, if I may, the importance of that for everyone, all of us in leadership, as we move forward to protect one another.
Thank you, Ms. Dockler. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, Ken, did you have something?
Can I quick say something? Sorry to interrupt you. I appreciate that.
I keep trying to close the meeting, but go ahead.
I only got a half hour to go, so.
Okay.
No, I would like to go along with what Mr. Sandy said too. And I think that one of the most important things that we can do as a community is make sure that we have sound data and people can make informed decisions off of that data. And hospitalizations that we talked about is certainly a piece of that important. also sometimes that leads to unfortunately deaths and what that impact could be across our community too. But I think the work that Mr. Weber has done, Mr. Giese, that's there to help kind of put together some science to the pandemic that we're going to, and gathering data is also a big piece of this thing here, and I hope that that can be implemented sooner rather than later, and we can let us all kind of have more information available again so we can make informed decisions about what we do and what we don't do. So I'm just hoping that that's something that will continue soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Veen. I think that's it. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Weber motions, Mr. Wagle seconds. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Adjourned. Two and a half, Kyle. It's all because of you.